that humor. My name is John Paczkowski. I'm the Human Wildlife Coexistence Team Lead with Alberta Forestry and Parks. I work with the parking lot at the provincial building. I've been in the area on and off for about 30 years. A biologist by training, and in the last few years, I've really been engaged in the Fireguard work, and I'll just explain a little of how it's become sort of near and dear to my heart. And if I can advance the slides. Yeah. Stand by. Oh, there we go. Thanks. Thanks, man. So as the Human Wildlife Coexistence Team Lead here, my job is to sort of try and bring together the needs of wildlife and people here in the valley and make sure that, we're trying to achieve a bit of a balance per se. And Gareth and I, we co-chair what's called the Human Wildlife Coexistence Technical Working Group. It's a group of interagency folks who are trying to further the cause of human wildlife coexistence here in the valley, and we meet regularly. And it's a really exciting and great group, and I think we're getting a lot of good things done. And we sort of go by the marching orders of a 2018 report on human wildlife coexistence. And one of the recommendations of that report that is too small to read is to enhance wildlife habitat. So there's 28 different recommendations of how we can sort of do better at improving wildlife habitat. And recommendation 15 here is just to improve habitat, make better habitat options for wildlife in the valley. And this is just from 2024, there are wildlife reports in town. And you can see the wildlife reports are really clustered into town. And a lot of what's driving that, I think, is the lack of good habitat around town. We're seeing more and more conflicts and reports in and around the periphery of town, and we're hoping to change that. And other than increased growth in town, what's been happening over the last 120 or so years is a real change in habitat. We're sitting just up there in downtown Canmore, and you can see there's hardly any trees in the valley. And it would have been great habitat for an array of wildlife species. And through fire suppression and other things, over time we've seen a loss of that habitat, right from the valley bottom to the top. And here's a view looking from Harvey Heights eastward towards the Three Sisters. And you can see this area had recently burned. You can see the downwood. This kind of open and edgy habitat would have been really good for wildlife. And over the last 120 years, it's filled in as well. And that lack of sunlight getting to the forest floor means a lack of productivity for the foods that wildlife like to eat. And if you open up these forests a little bit, you create better habitat. And grizzly bears, I'm a bear researcher primarily, are species of open habitats. They like these open and edge habitats. And if you open up the forest just a little bit, it creates forest understory growth that wildlife tend to like. This is just the result of some pine beetle removal out by the Nordic Center. But you can just see by looking at the lushness of the grass and the vegetation that's coming in from underneath, and the buffalo berries filled in and grown in, and the wildlife like that. Thank you. So that's on a small scale. If you look at this at a large scale, these are some cut blocks. Barrier lakes over here. This is in the Sybil area. You can see that mosaic of cut blocks that are kind of modeled across the hillsides there. This is just data from one of our grizzly bears that kind of moved out of GPS data that moved out of the area. And he was spending about 75% of his time in those cut blocks, in those forest openings, selecting for that kind of habitat. And this isn't something new and exciting to science. We've known this for bears for a long time. Just demonstrating that. Some other sort of forest opening habitat work. This is just across from the Canopy village that was cut in 1985. We did some work on Spray Lakes a couple of years ago where we opened up some habitat areas that'll help to sort of draw animals away from campgrounds and other facilities. And more close to home is that patch we did in 2002 at the Canmore Nordic Center. And that's really good habitat. That's what it looks like now. It's probably one of the best berry patches in the valley, and certainly with crawling with berry this year. Problem is to get to that, you have to go through this. You have to get those trees out of there, and it's jarring, and it's a bit of work, and you've got to get the forest cover and timber out of there and open up those areas for wildlife to get to a point where it's a better situation for wildlife. And that's just kind of a bit of background. That's where I'm coming from on this. That's kind of my take on all of this. So now I'm going to sort of switch gears into what's called the Bow Valley Fireguard. And it's a project that's been happening now for almost a couple of years in the Bow Valley, multi-agency group committed to trying to protect communities and people and infrastructure. And I'm kind of riding along on this, but my lens on this is through the lens of wildlife and how can we do this and also achieve wildlife gains. So it's a multi-agency committee that we're sort of moving forward on. And very positive sort of group. And I'll say that it's all been made sort of very possible by FREA, the Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta. This is provincial money that was put out. Now there's been a lot of FREA funding for fire smarting smaller projects, but this was an initiative that offered up millions and millions of dollars to do community level fire breaks. And it was by the Ministry of Forestry and Parks. And when that money became available, a group of us convened and started planning for what is now the Bow Valley Fireguard project. And this is kind of big picture what it looks like. A lot of these orange areas in the background are fire smarted areas that have been done previously. And the reds and the greens are areas that are, I'll elaborate on, that are sort of done or almost done, and then the yellow stuff is what's coming down the road in the future. A few people have asked, well, just a response to Jasper, and we had started planning last year in April. Prior to Jasper, submitted for funding in May. Jasper happened weeks or a couple months later. This was not, our fire guide was not a response to Jasper, but it certainly stiffened the resolve of the group to move forward with this and do it in an accelerated fashion. And I think it's also seen a lot more social buy-in because of Jasper. It's like, wow, that just happened. So it really sort of helped drive us forward. I'll mention the three main phases of the Fireguard project. We'll talk about Stoneworks Creek, which was done for the last year in East Park Gates and Harvey Heights. The CNC work here at the Nordic Center, which is just kind of wrapping up, and I'll talk a bit about the future planning. So Stoneworks Creek, a 2 kilometer wide fire break. Now the areas in red are total harvest, and the areas in green are more sensitive, so they're thin, pruned, clean, and you might have seen a trickle of smoke coming up from Stoneworks over the last few weeks. It seems like they're done. I don't see any smoke for the last day or so. I'm looking to the back of the room there. But so in those areas where we can mechanically harvest, we did. In those red areas, the green was a little more sensitive, so with hand crews going in there and removing those trees. And that started last fall. Again, a perimeter around Harvey Heights, 150 meter wide, and then some thin, prune, clean work on the edge of that. So just to give you an idea, there's sort of the planning map for Stoneworks, and then based on satellite imagery, that's what it looks like from space. And you can still see the road there that's going to be reclaimed. And then I'll show you some other satellite images in just a second too. That's what the Stoneworks Creek area looks like now. It's turning into some really nice sort of Douglas fir savanna with patches of aspen. And, you know, we've seen all those urban elk here in town. That's going to give the elk in town somewhere to go so they're not sort of on the playgrounds and the school fields and on the side of the highway and such too. So that's kind of my dream as a biologist, to see this area sort of become a better area for ungulates and other critters. Another look at it there. And you'll see those tiles there, all the small ones have been mulched already, but those big ones still need to get disposed of and taken out of there, and I'll talk a bit about that later. And that should be happening this winter out at Stoneworks. Once all the work is done, the road will be reclaimed, and this is an example of what that kind of looks like. There's the road, and that's what it looks like after the reclaimed. So that's kind of that Stoneworks, the north side of the valley. We shift over to the Canmore Nordic Center a little bit to talk about what's been happening over there. So the CNC West, and let me go back to that. Sorry, the CNC West is over here, and you can see that from the Trans-Canada Highway as you're coming out of Banff. It's that big, steep section of trees that ties in with the work that was done in 2002 here in case of a fire break along this side. Really complex area to work in, steep terrain, new technology, new machines. That's kind of what it looks like from drone footage we just took. Just wrapped up a couple of weeks ago in there, and it's steep, quite steep. This picture doesn't really show the steepness of it, but it was all cable logging, really labor intensive, hauling machinery and logs up and down to finally complete that fire break. You know, I'll take a second to point out that the fellow in the red vest is Stu Walkinshaw. He's kind of the mastermind behind this Fireguard project and many other projects that have happened here in other communities in Western Canada. It's kind of his brainchild, and it's been a real pleasure just to be an assistant or fixer in accomplishing his vision here. So I think you have to sort of appreciate that the big picture of all this is sort of what Stu has put together from experience, and man, he works hard. He can be a bit of a hard ass sometimes, and he has points when he's like softer, although I've never seen that. But yeah, we owe a lot to Stu's expertise on this one. Okay, PNC East. This is the area that's above the Day Lodge, and you're seeing that cut into the slope these days over the last couple of weeks. That's been sort of expanding. Again, the red areas are harvest, and this is a slightly older map. It's modified a little. The green areas will be thin, sensitive habitat. And then there's a little area that was logged right down on the bottom there. That's that area up to the Bow River, sort of completing that fire break below the Day Lodge. And then it'll tie into, I don't know if you knew, there's an old ski hill above the Canmore Nordic Center in the 60s. So it'll sort of tie in with a bit of a fuel reduction there. Now, looking at the Nordic Center, I sort of, supportive of the Fireguard work, wanted to jump in and maybe add to that a little bit with some other potential habitat enhancement. And we saw this open area here and what that kind of looked like. But I thought, well, while we're at it, why don't we sort of open up some other habitats here above the Nordic Center to create some openings for various wildlife species. And you know, I said I'm a bear guy, so I really wanted to work for bears, but I think this works a lot for other species as well. And like, don't ask me, ask a grizzly bear. This is grizzly bear 148, and on her forays into town from Banff, she came to the Nordic Center, and you'll notice there's that forest opening, the mine meadow, some other openings. This is her GPS data from her last couple trips into town, and it really tells the tale of where did she go. She goes from open area to open area to open area. Unfortunately, the open areas around town were also a bit of an attractive, which led to her demise, we'll call it. But the grizzly bears agreed. Yep. Later. Just because it's fun, I'll just talk about how we sort of plan out some of these habitat enhancement areas. Stu did the planning for the Fireguard work, but we use things like LiDAR. It's sort of really very helpful. It's just like, this is what the Bow Valley looks like naked, you know, cover up. And you can use this tool to sort of add the slope areas and the operational areas that, you know, machinery can work in. For the red areas are too steep to operate in. From that, lay out some blocks. First, I laid out 10 of these habitat blocks, and then after we reviewed them a little bit, scaled them back to 8, and then we scaled them back even further for operational considerations this year. But what I was trying to do is build sort of ecological stepping stones so wildlife would sort of move to the valley and have some patches to work in that are up and out of the Nordic Center. And then the roads and logistics of all that. And that would all tie in nicely with the Fireguards, the Nordic Center, with the east and west blocks of that Fireguard. So these 4 blocks here, about a week and a half ago, that's what it looks like. There's the mine meadow up here, and there's those blocks, and you can see the retention patches in there. We sort of left all the gullies and things too, and I think it's going to look really good. It's going to look rough for a couple of years, but in a few years, it's going to be sweet for wildlife habitat. And working at the Nordic Center is a challenge. It's a multi-use thing. There's thousands and thousands of people who like using that, so we've had to restrict use there to get this all done. We just wrapped up Sunday night. Last Sunday, Stu was out there spreading seed and reclamation, but it was really a big push to get that all done, and a lot of work. From those wildlife blocks, 461 loads of wood came out. That's just in front of the day lodge at the Nordic Center, not your usual site. And yeah, it's a bit jarring when you sort of come around the corner to what used to be a tree trail. And hopefully you'll get out there and have a chance to look at it yourself. But we don't have sound, so you're down at the end of the damn trail there with the mark boundary. And got another big load of potatoes coming out. And there were some really large wood in there, and volumes were a lot higher than we thought. And one thing I didn't mention is the wood that's generated, revenue from the wood that's coming out of these is going back into support Fireguard work here or defer the cost to the taxpayer. Maybe when we get into the panel discussion, we can talk a bit more about how much of that, but there was hundreds of thousands of dollars coming back in to defer the cost. So this is really not costing the Alberta taxpayer too much. And some of these trees I counted range were 150, 160 years old. This is a satellite image from just a couple of days ago that I downloaded. So between stonework, the work you're seeing here, seeing west, you start to see, it's like the armor that is going to protect us if a big fire comes through. You've got these breaks here, and there's still a lot of work to be done. But you start to sort of put together the big picture of what's happening here. And I hope that makes sense to you. Kind of, I looked at these images a lot, so I kind of recognize everything. Just wrapping up here, and we do a lot of debris disposal and discussions about debris disposal, and we've looked at options, things like biochar and air curtain burners. We've even tried to bury a few piles, and some of the wood gets mulched. And we're, really cost effectively burning is the most cost effective. It's an orders of magnitude going up. So these are huge piles. Like a couple piles would fill this room easily, and they're a lot of work to move or chip or burn or turn into biochar. They're a lot easier just to light up. And there's cost and there's benefits and some discomfort with some of that as well. And I impetuously got about 25 piles burned this fall. Bit of a learning experience, but we're just trying to get that debris out of there and move it along. Sorry for the smoke, but there will be more. And that's just an example, a poor photo of trying to bury some of it too, and that was very cost prohibitive too. It costs a lot of money to have big machines dig big holes in the side of the mountains. Okay, so just wrapping up, what's happening next in the coming years? is this yellow band in the south boundary. So this will go from Paczkowski and actually the canal all the way over to Dead Man's Flat in some form or other, and I'll show you a more detailed version of that in just a second. So that'll complete the perimeter of the Fireguards around the town. There'll be a mixture of mechanical thinning. There'll be some hand thinning work, and then I've also added on some habitat enhancement areas where we'll remove some trees. And we've done some field visits in there. This is Dugan, who's really hard to photograph. You never get a good shot of him, with Josh from West Fraser. And I would say West Fraser has been really good to work with and very adaptable and very, you know, when I say, hey, I want some more of this over here and some more trees there, like they're out there right away, flagging it off. And yeah, very, very great to work with. So that will be next year. Hopefully the application for funding for that has just gone in. Yeah, we'll hopefully see that built around the south boundary. It's going to be a more complex area. There's a lot of different terrain in there. There's wildlife corridors, access and land ownership will make it challenging, but we've been at this for 2 years now. So I think hopefully we'll get through it smoothly. So there's the south boundary. The pink area will be thin. The orange area will be mechanically harvested, and then these blue areas will be sort of added on for wildlife, where we can get machinery up and people to create a little extra habitat. And that's also a really big piece of land. Like I said, it's going to be challenging and interesting terrain to work with moving forward. That's kind of the snapshot of what's been going on, what's been happening. And like I said, I'm out there in the field trying to think, how can we make this work a little better for wildlife, so it's not just a logging show, you know, and make sure we protect the town long term. It's been really exciting to kind of try and realize this dream of sort of restoring habitat on a large scale. I think back to the work that you'll hear from Cliff soon. You know, I was there when Cliff was lighting up Northway and the sawback burn 30 years ago. And these huge landscape level changes that are really, you can still see them today in the work that Bill carried the torch, so to speak, in terms of creating new habitat in Banff as well. And then now to be working with Caitlin and sort of moving this whole project forward together. It's been really exciting for a biologist who, you know, gets to maybe make these large landscape level long-term changes that are going to benefit wildlife and hopefully keep people safe. So I think if we do these things like protecting, you know, our towns and people, and we do it carefully and cautiously, and I think logging is a good tool to do that, we can sort of come out with some benefits for wildlife. And that's kind of what I'm hoping is the take-home message from my first part here. But I think, like Gareth said, we've got a ton of experience in the room and people here who know a lot more about this and have lived through a lot more than I have. And hopefully you can ask some questions and we can engage in the discussion about that. And if you would like to reach out to me directly, there's my contact information. Please do.
For John. Thanks, Steve, and thanks, John. And we've assembled, you know, easily over 100 years of really good expertise on fire and ecology, and that's not even counting. I didn't even count the answers, but there's a lot of expertise in it. And so I'm gonna, and so here's how it's gonna roll. We'll do questions soon. We've invited basically the charge for our three panelists who will want to represent sex. And basically, you guys will have to at least have between 3 and 5 minutes to introduce yourselves, please. Give your response to what John had to say in terms of any personal name, add your color commentary, as only you know how, and look at any element as high as possible. So, and I'm going to ask too that please introduce yourself. Please stand when you're speaking because you don't have a stage here, so we'll see that as well. And share, not only share the mic, but also talk into the mic. That's really important. people in the room, but also to opportunity to the people on Zoom who would otherwise not know what the heck's going on. So, Caitlin, Bill, and just wanted to join us up here. And then in terms of the speaking order, I'm going to propose, unless you haven't participated with it, but I'm going to suggest, Chris and Stephen of that, can you do that? All right, so, John, I thought I could hold on to do that with our guys, and, just kind of your speaking, and just, how much you thought and give us your first comment, just, all right, well, people in the room, I put why they used to be about that from the 70s to about 20 or so. Still happening. And so it's great to see this is going on. The valley here has had a long, long history of fuel breaks being built, probably starting about 1890 with the first one built in that, and it's continued on for quite a bit of time. And it's really a long story of almost forgotten fuel breaks, and fuel breaks get built, and everybody sort of celebrates them like we are today, and then they overgrow. So it's sort of like putting a very expensive Cadillac in your driveway, and then unfortunately you find out you're out of money for gas, and you don't have a driving plan. But and that's sort of where we're at this next round of field breaks comes along, and hopefully we can come up with a longer term solution. But it's good to see, and so field breaks around the towns and close to the towns are really important. And I sort of give you maybe an analogy. It's sort of like the dikes around New Orleans. You've got now a nice dike to protect around your town and close, maybe a fuel break of about a kilometer, and that will probably buffer you if a fire gets too close to town. As long as within the dike you've done the right things in terms of fire smarting, looked after your roof, and all the things that will protect you from a major embers shower when plans goes over. But at least you won't have a fire like was getting close to Jasper that would have 200-kilometer-an-hour winds, was moving 2-ton garbage cans around and pointing things around. And so, by having a fuel break, you at least get the fire intensity and severity down. And then if you've done the fire spawning inside the town, you might survive the embers shower. Remembering if one house on your block catches fire, you'll probably lose your block. So it's not too late. So now let's talk about the rest of the Mississippi River that's up from New Orleans, which is what's the rest of the landscape you're in. And 2,000 square kilometers roughly for the landscape. Some of it can be logged, but a lot of it can't. And that's the story of BC. But no very aggressive logging programs in sector in BC for 50 years. You don't log everything. You have a lot of forests left over, places you don't log. They grow over. The fire regime has been interrupted. What used to burn every 50 years is now being burned every 500 years on average. Even though we think we're burning a lot now, we're not even close to the long-term fire cycle. And so in this valley here, there's going to be a lot more fire. And it should be, or disturbance in general, should be, if you look at that, we've got 2,000-3,000 square kilometers here. You should be looking at, somewhere in the close to 20 or 30, 50 square kilometers a year should be being disturbed by fire or some logging to maintain at least a balance of biomass. But that's not being done. And we've been under 10 square kilometers in this valley now for 20 years. There's a period of where we got up to about 15 or so. But it's accumulating. And when it accumulates, once it gets over 100 or 200 tons a hectare, it becomes the Athabasca Valley, and it generates energy you just can't believe. It's just like a hurricane or a tornado going down that valley, like I say, flowing Yukon stands across the river and stuff like that. It's energy you can't believe. So that's what you have to start to think about is that, indigenous folks stepped this valley very young. Those old pictures, they left the people at about 20 years. They thought that was a good way to be. And we're not. And it means a lot more smoke, a lot more energy, a lot more cooperation between the towns and the surrounding land. If you go on the web here, we're working with a group of folks doing a thing called Burning Dance right now. And we're trying to get the fuel breaks maintained, trying to get money set aside for maintenance, trying to recognize that you're probably going to be about an 80-20% split even in the valley with 10 to 20% logging, and 80% has to be fired. That's a fair bit of smoke. And you just have to support that. If you don't, if you say, well, no, we're going to have blue skies for 30, 40 years, well, then we'll do the Athabasca Valley, and you'll get the 40 years of clear weather that you're going to. And one warning I have is it's not the first fire that's the bad one, it's the second one. So the Fairhope Bench was burned out here in 2003. It's about, if the deal was made with the natural fruits there, that would be with log, make a fuel break, and 10% would be fuel break, and about 90% would be burnt, and that was then done. But then the next fire had to be put in behind to get
all the downwood and accumulates. This is going on in Jasper from the Fairholme Bench. And that second fire is a tough one. It's called the reburn. It's very famous in the West where they logged a bunch and got a bunch of slabs. But you can do the same thing with fire. It gets knocked down and it just sits there. You can't log it. It's not commercial anymore. But it has to be burnt. And that's the long-term regime. But it's a tough fire. So get ready for some tough burning. And so some of these fuel breaks that really have to be maintained because if they're going up against the physical part and national park land, you need to recognize that second fire is going to get the first one and then the second one gets that one. So there's a lot more work to be done. And I think the long term will have to be community forests where the towns, and this is great what Canmore's done, it's got really integrated with the Biosphere. Got lucky, having Steve Walkinshaw here. You had a minister that just came to town with a couple $1 million in pockets that'll help you out. But towns are going to have to start looking after themselves, and they need to reach out about 5 kilometers into the surrounding lands to work with the provincial agencies or the federal agencies to get the job done. Because these are big agencies that have national and provincial responsibilities. The crews aren't always there, so your local fire departments within 20 years or so, I think, will be your key managers of these fuel breaks. They will be the ones that keep them open, maintain them, working through the service, and we need to do an understory burn or whatever we're going to do here. And because they're not cheap to maintain either, but the way to maintain them is largely what will be the fire and the local fire department. So I think that's what we're doing.
I'm Caitlin Miller. I'm the Director of Emergency Management and the Manager of Protective Services for the town of Canmore. And I get to be the project manager on the Bow Valley Community Fireguard project. So it's a really exciting one. Now, Cliff took a lot of my talking points about like talk to your neighbor, neighborhood recognition program, Fire Smart begins at home. So please, if you are interested and you are not already a Fire Smart champion like Gareth here, who started his own neighborhood Fire Smart committee, then go on to the Town of Canmore website and check that out. Now, the Bow Valley Community Fireguard, it started actually when we were advocating for the province, and council was advocating for the province for the Bow Valley vegetation management strategy to be completed, because we are surrounded by a lot of provincial land. So we were really advocating for there to be a plan to actually manage all of the overgrown lodgepole pine that we see here that was posing a big threat to us. And what came out of that was the announcement of a Fireguard program, a community Fireguard program. And so we did get together in a room. I think it might have been March, maybe not April. I think we submitted in April, but close enough. And we got together and decided that the town of Canmore would lead this project on behalf of the MD of Bighorn and with support of Alberta Forestry and Parks, considering 95% of what we're working on is on provincial land. So we also actually have our friends from Parks Canada sitting in on that project as well, because I'm not sure if you noticed, but a lot of the work that we've done to date has been up to the park gates. And so with the park gates, we're actually tying into the great work that had already been done, because we know that there's plans to maintain that. And by communicating with the other regional partners, like so making sure that the MDA Bighorn's at the table, making sure Kananaskis Improvement District is there, making sure that we're not like duplicating work or like building a garden in an unnecessary spot maybe, or just making sure that everything complements each other. We've been really working together on that. And so we do that at the Bow Valley Community Fireguard team, but we're also doing that at the Bow Valley Interagency Wildfire Committee. And that committee has a subgroup that focuses on wildfire risk reduction, communication, but then we also are working to make sure that we're complementing each other as we build out our mitigation strategies and plans so that we can make sure that it all fits together. So we get really excited when we hear Parks Canada talking about the upcoming work in the spring. They get really excited when we do work on our side of the valley at the Nordic Center, because that's a harder spot for them to get in. It's really hard to get equipment there, and you pretty much have to go through on our side. Really difficult to get in on the other side. So by working together and complementing each other, it really becomes that community focus. And going back to the community part of it, our fire department actually is hiring a regional fire smart coordinator. Again, that's funded through BRIA to get the ball rolling, and they want to build capacity in communities to have somebody dedicated to manage these projects. It is a big job, and a lot of us currently do it off the side of our plate. So this regional fire smart coordinator is actually going to support the town of Canmore, MDFA Port, and Kananaskis Improvement District to continue to engage and reach out and have people fire smart their homes. Because while we're doing all this work on the outside, that's right. Like, if we're not doing the work ourselves on our own properties, we're not mitigating against the wildfire. We each need to do our own part, and that means every person in this room, if you live in a home, you have to go home and at least download the Fire Smart Begins at Home. Do your own self-assessment. Book an assessment with Canmore Fire. Start talking to your neighbors. Like, build that community so that we can all work together on wildfire mitigation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bill Hunt. I'm the Senior Director of Conservation Programs with YY. I've just been with YY for a couple of months now, but prior to that, I worked just over 32 years in Parks Canada. And for the last 11 years of my career, I've been a conservation manager in Banff with folks like that. I moved to the Bow Valley in '95, and I live in Hardy Heights. I want to talk a little bit about changing attitudes. So Hardy Heights loves their trees. And when I moved there fairly early on, there was a discussion of the little fire smart fitting project that was getting taken place. There was a lot of nervous people, a lot of mental illness, a lot of negativity. And I think Stu might have been actually in charge of that one, and not 100%. But it was a group of continuing kids that came in with axes and mentors, and they removed ladder fuel on the east end of our, the west end of our neighborhood. And so that was a winner's work. They kept that, did burn piles and cleaned it up. And people walked through afterwards and said, yeah, it's not so bad. You can actually sort of see through the woods, and you might actually be able to see it there before you run into it. We like this. So a few years later, phase 2 around Hardy Heights, and that was up on the upper bench. And that's when some bigger equipment came in, and it was a little uglier afterwards. There were some stumps. But that grew back and looked better over time. And people said, yeah, that was just fun. And so more recently, this last winter, or 2 winters ago, Stu and the team came in. They worked closely with the neighborhood. They ran through lots of plans with the neighborhood. And we now have a huge fire guard around Hardy Heights. And it looks pretty ugly, to be clear. But we've seen how that land is going to heal and improve over time. And so that's creating the biodiversity that John was speaking about. And that biodiversity is absolutely critical for healthy environments and healthy neighborhoods. And so it's protecting the neighborhood and it's creating diversity for wildlife. It's a good thing. I think what we really need to think about now into the future is this is the perfect time we've changed attitudes about fire and fuel and thinning. And I think at the same time now, we really need to think about attitudes around wildlife connectivity and wildlife corridors. So these areas, these swaths that we're creating, we want bears to use them, we want other wildlife to move up into those areas. We've increased sightings, right? There's a big opening there. So our disturbance effect of being on a trail or hiking by or skiing by, we're going to be detected in further distance. Noise and light pollution are going to have more impact in these areas. So we need to rethink and update our thinking around wildlife corridors as well. It's the perfect time to do it. So I'd ask the same people that are coming together and thinking about fire smart things. Let's start the conversation and renew the conversation around effective wildlife corridors. What can you do in the way you manage your health and recreation to support wildlife being able to use these new areas that we're creating for wildlife? And there's lots of simple things you can do. One of the easiest is not being so much spatially, but temporally. If we can leave these areas quiet and dark at night, wary wildlife like cougars and wolves and some of the bears, some bears are not at all wary, some bears are very wary. Those bears and wolves and cougars can use those areas to dark. And there's a ton of literature out there that shows that if we keep it secure, nighttime habitat for wildlife, they can still use these corridors and then allow wolves and cougars and other wildlife to get around the town safely and avoid coming into town. So I think these are conversations that we have to have, and it's a perfect time to do it. Thank you. This is where we have a full hatch right here. If you don't do fire smart on your own house, all of this is a complete waste of time. Everything I've read about the Jasper burn, is that the town caught fire because of others. And so if you haven't done your fire smarting on your own building, got rid of those cedar shakes as soon as you can afford to, clean up the firewood up from under your deck, brushed your trees, all that kind of stuff. And it's all easy to do and it's all available on the Fire Smart website. If you haven't done that, all of this effort and work and energy that's gone into the Fireguards, you will not do a lot of good things in that. So please talk to your neighbors, have a look around your property, check out the information on it.
Okay, so, John was offered the chance to add any other commentary was on. You took a pass on that, which is cool. We're gonna do that. Hey, big hand to be said. Oh, sure. So I'm gonna look at my colleague Nick. If there's any questions that come coming in, Nick, through the Zoom audience. Any good questions, like let me know. I'll talk to you in a second here. Now John took half an hour to talk to with a slide. He delivered a whole lot of content that has headed with us, but we have more time, so he delivered more content. If you have any questions for John Paczkowski, I would invite you to stand. Please give us your name. And then shout out the question as loud as you can. Okay, don't shout out the question as loud as you can. Use your teaching voice, to kind of make sure everyone can hear. I'll paraphrase. This is good edit. And then if you have a question for, questions for John, please take it off. John, that's it. Anyway. I would just want to give a shout out to Adrian, who's represents us, our interest in the council, and also Mr. Good. Council Good.
What is it to talk to Coexistence up in the Canmore, Yellowstone? It's really wildlife after the number of people who have wrestling at the same time. How does those people coexist together?
Thanks, Lee. The question relates to how do we manage wildlife coexistence in a place like the Canmore Nordic Center where we're actively going and a lot of people are heading up there. So, yeah, and I think it is a challenge. Like the Canmore Nordic Center is identified in all of our planning guidelines as a habitat patch, and we've typically tried to sort of keep things, keep areas that are far and away down at the west end free in the summertime where those berry patches are and things are good, but more and more users are in and out of there. I think that's one of the reasons I wanted those habitat patches to get put in. And then we're also working with the Nordic Center with the Canmore Area Trail Master Plan to maybe deactivate some trails in the summertime to create a few more of those holes and open spaces for wildlife to filter through. Yeah, so we are giving it some thought, but it is a challenge. And when you have an event with 1,000 people that's running 24 hours, it's hard. It's hard to balance those needs of wildlife and humans when we're sort of having those huge and big events. We're trying to make sure that those happen in an effective way. But it is, that's a real, it is a challenge.
Mr. Leggy,
my name is Derek Ryder. Question, John. My question is, how we'll do all of this work to try and enhance wildlife habitat. How are we going to know it worked? What measurement methodologies are we going to use to try and see whether or not animals are moving back to or using the spaces we're creating for them?
Thanks, Derek, for the slightly loaded question. And the question is, how do we know if this is working, and how can we tell if it's a success, especially from a wildlife perspective? Fortunately, we have about 120 wildlife cameras set up in a grid array across the valley. So that's a really good indicator. We've got some of those cameras have been up for 15, 16 years. We have a really nice baseline when we did all the fire guard work on stonework, we pulled 12 cameras out of there, but then we reinstalled them after. So we'll have sort of a snapshot over time before and after, and I think that'll really help tell the tale of whether this is working and how it's working. And I think there's going to need to be adjustments and improvements. That we do winter tracking as well, snow tracking. We have transects, and after it snows, we'll go out with the phones. And we're hoping to get some more animals collared in the valley, which we don't have a lot of, but then that'll start to show whether they're, like you saw with Bear 148, using those open patches, or these new bears, using those patches. So we're on it. We're hopefully on it.
Just follow up. How long, what kind of timeline would you expect that to occur over?
What would the timeline be for seeing some sort of responsive wildlife? And I think we're looking at 3 to 5 years before those forest openings start to look good. Stonework was pretty damn good this year because of all the rain we had, but it's going to take 3-5 years. You're going to look at 5 to 15 years where it's going to be really good, and then there'll be, let's say, diminishing over the next 10 years after that in terms of its habitat quality. Now, if we're maintaining the fire guards, maybe that will keep things open. Some of those habitat patches might, as Cliff alluded to, get thick again, but we're talking decades of habitat.
Go ahead, Ed.
Thanks, John. Ed Williams. I think it's great that we're creating these habitat patches, which clearly is a plus for our charismatic megafauna. To what degree do we understand it being a minus to some of the charismatic microfauna? So, I'm thinking of like avian species and nesting habitat. So how much do we understand that, and how do we mitigate that as plans?
The question is, how do we understand the impacts for megafauna, microfauna, and avian species? We did set up, when we first started speaking of the fire guard, we did put out a bunch of avian monitors in those areas that are now going to be fire guard, and then we had some control monitors in the woods. When I looked at the data, there are some species that like the deep dark woods, but I think we had about a 6 or 7 fold increase in the avian species that were in the open areas. It was just way better. The cameras aren't great at monitoring for the small critters. So yes, there will be an impact. Some bird species don't like those open areas, don't like the edge effect. Predation like go up from raptors and things like that. So we don't have a great handle on it. I have reached out to universities and tried to encourage some academics to sort of get involved in the monitoring. I haven't had any bites yet. It's unfortunate. I would rather have a more fulsome picture on this, but this is all happening pretty fast. But it's a good point, a bit of a hole. I would love to sort of answer those questions more fully in the future.
Well, about Jacob Herrera, go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Jacob. How about, 40% of the forest is active, which also is much better for other species. I don't know, I just say that over time, this wants to remove the forest that has much more happening in the fact because now, also I believe that group may actually must be a step before that sounds like kind of win-win.
So the question was about whether these cleared areas could eventually be regrown with aspen. It's a more fire-resistant species than, or fire-resistant, but less of a concern than some of the conifers. Yeah, and I think the answer is definitely yes. It's creating biodiversity is what we're doing. And in some areas where logging is the primary, timber production is the primary driver, Those aspen are then, they naturally come up in these open areas and they're cut down or sprayed, if you can believe it, to remove aspen so the conifer can grow. And certainly in this scenario, that should not be happening. We should be allowing and promoting species like aspen. I was recently working up in Whitehorse, and they're actually planting native berry crops into those clear cuts. They're doing a similar fireguard around that project, and there's research underway to look at recipes and techniques for propagating a wide range of berry crops, again, as a wildlife trap within those habitat patches. Oh, and then also just say, the question about birds and smaller mammals, there's tons of literature out there on that, which species will do well following clear cutting. We've been logging this part of the road for a very long time, and there's been a lot of research done, so that information is readily.
I guess you're well aware of this, Jacob, but you have the mountain legacy photographs here. And particularly the part that we got here into the gate, so we have a nice mosaic of the whole Bow Valley, what it looked like virtually at the same time it's still in the photo, it's still here. And when you look down that landscape, recognize that probably every almost square foot of that, somebody knew something about that and was burning it and looking after it and caring for it for berry crops, for all sorts of habitat and long-term things. And so we actually know what this valley looked like. And, we won't be able to bring all of it back that way, but a lot of these places we could start to say, okay, there should be Saskatoon there, there should be aspen there, there should be, red out the dog with you. So hopefully you start to put some of that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's a great. Good one.
Yeah, so the question is, are we looking at alternatives to burning when we are looking at disposing of our debris piles? And we continue to look for alternatives to burning. We have done actually a lot of different things. We've used an air current incinerator. We have, John just recently tried burning it. And we've looked at every time somebody comes across our desk and has an alternative to burning, we investigate it. One of the great things about working with West Fraser is they actually helped with some of that investigation. They helped go to Lafarge, now Amrise, which I found out this week, and talk about waiving the tipping fee to use the debris in a different way. We've looked at mulching some of it to reduce the amount and putting that back into the soil. The challenge is the cost of tipping and hauling and doing something different with it often is exponentially higher than the cost of burning. And with it being grant funded, there are limitations to how much more we can ask for. And if there was a different way that was maybe just marginally more expensive, that's something that we've had that conversation with Bria. We've had that conversation to we're going to continue investigating because community impact is a top priority for us. But we also understand that if we don't get rid of this debris, the community impact is that we've left the hazard there. And so we're trying to balance what that looks like. So there will be smoke this year. Those piles are quite big. When we were burning the wildlife habitat enhancement piles or the targeted fuel reduction, those piles they were as cured as ours were. We've left ours out for a year. We've done a lot of different things to try to minimize the smoke and help them burn faster. Now we are just waiting for weather. And those are big piles. We want to burn them safely. We want to burn them quickly. We just need to make sure that we have the right weather conditions to do that. So we continue to investigate. So you guys saw me sitting next to Joey. Joey always has ideas. So open book, if you have an idea that we should look at, please send us our way because we do take it quite seriously. And that's actually something we look at the Bow Valley Interagency Wildfire Committee is we share that information too. So when Parks Canada tries something, they're like, hey, I just tried this. This is like what my challenges were. And we're like, okay, cool, we'll try this one. And so we do go back and forth. We discuss it quite a bit because it is a big priority for us to look at other solutions. And we're not set on it just being burning. We are like keen to find something new.
You know, that's good questions. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, I'm gonna lend you. All of this topic of burning and smoke. Hello, everyone. I'm Suzanne Kyle, and this question is for anyone, possibly a few people. What intensive plans are in place to help the people in the Bow Valley who have severe breathing problems versus just saying, oh, we'll let you know, we're gonna be burning. Well, they live here.
I'll take this one. So the town of Canmore does have a wildfire smoke emergency response plan as well. So as conditions get worse, we really encourage people to know their own vulnerabilities because it's not the same for everybody. And everybody has a different capacity for being able to handle the smoke. So first of all, you have to know how it's going to affect you. And then second of all, be informed. So Purple Air is a tool that we use for ourselves to monitor air quality in the region. And it's powered by citizen science. I believe we had, was there something with an air talk here as well? Did you guys see Purple Air? And we built air filters. So, and with that, like having the right air filters at home, looking at those citizen science types of organizations, knowing where your clean air centers are. So we're in one here, and we actually have a Purple Air monitor inside here as well. And just being able to take care of yourself and what that looks like for you, and reaching out if you do need resources. And Alberta Health Services also have a number of really good resources online for different ways to manage the smoke as it affects you based off of your very specific condition.
You want to add to that? He's got this great quote that I'm just begging you. It's going to make my day if I hear it. Go ahead.
Probably not gonna make anybody else's day. Well, we used to always say, well, how would you like to have your smoke? Would you like it in small white cups, or do you want one big black one? And you have to leave the valley. So there's always this trade-off that you're right, we need to have systems where you can, get the people and remind them that, okay, there's trouble times ahead.
Let me just one more question with that, please. Please, go ahead. Your name and big word.
We've only picking up on a couple of things that Seth mentioned, and I just want to mention to them, in the program, their potential role after the study service, perhaps, but when people, because of the family path to the landscapes, and even the
We're just going to give a shout out to Mrs. Steinbeck, Shaw, and he and his colleague Wendy are responsible for by far the best, most successful neighborhood level fire smarting in the Bow Valley and the East Grassy area. And we were privileged to watch that and Biosphere put together a short video that puts the highlights of what we've done here. And I can just, before I let you guys answer the question, I just wanted to say that as Caitlin mentioned, I've taken on the role of this fire smart champion, or I told you that I was today. But anyway, I'm leading my little neighborhood of 19 homes in a little committee meeting, I think second time Wednesday night, to talk about what we might do with the group in both our neighborhood, not my house, not anyone else's, but the neighborhood more resilient when it comes to wildfire and reduce the risk. Totally for recognition of the fact that, as somebody said, it only takes one home in my neighborhood to burn down before and that's just all the homes in my neighborhood burn down. And we're having a heck of a lot of fun as you can talk to Simon as our local expert on this stuff. And couldn't agree more to what we said. And we all said we're pretty good. Sorry, very good. It's necessary but not sufficient. Sufficient. making sure that individual homes are prioritized the best of their ability. So I think that's something that we have to take on, that this is the number one risk to our community, and my own, our perspective is, we can just be, we can do like all of us should be doing, having a little go backpack and listen to the farmers and stuff to do. And that's just basically being, responsive to the threat, but wouldn't it be nice to lean into this and do something that, reduces the threat, as opposed to just getting ready to run away when the bad stuff comes roaring down the line. So, and thank you for your question, and I think it's for anyone, yeah.
I just want to repeat it, please, for the other.
I'll support Phoebe as well, and thank you. If you want more, go to canmore.ca/emergency preparedness, and there's a full community preparedness guide on there as well. The question though was about Indigenous cultural burning, and if we if there's space for Stony Dakota to, or I'm guessing anybody from Troop 7 to be able to bring their cultural knowledge with prescribed burning and cultural burning back to the landscape. So we have done a lot of work with the Aboriginal Consultation Office to talk to our Indigenous neighbors, all in Treaty 7, throughout this process. And we go through this as a part of the process to make sure that we're getting the whole perspective and to see if there's any concerns and anything that we should know is. Unfortunately, in our region, cultural burning is not a knowledge that I am aware of, has continued, and it is not something that has been maintained in the area. So there's work being done up north and in different treaty areas to do that type of work with our with the different treaties, but that just isn't something that the knowledge has been kept.
Well, we're a pretty neat spot for a lot of this. Right now, as we speak, there's Indigenous people are hunting bison in the Red River Valley. And fairly quickly, I would imagine within a year or two, there'll be Indigenous people hunting bison in the spring. And they'll be combining fire and bison with the logs of hunting techniques. And on the Fairhome Bank, once the guards are in place and we've got fairly safe burning conditions, we actually didn't work with people that much there, but there's a lot you can do once guards are in place to let people come back out and burn and do smaller burns within the bigger burns. And it's quite safe. So hopefully as time goes on and we get the fuel breaks in place, and start to realize just how important it is to do that fine scale habitat management and bring back the native species at that level that we don't even understand yet. The Indigenous people need to rediscover it.
We also have asked that specific question just to see if there was anybody in the region. So if you do come across someone, I encourage you to let us know and we can get in touch with them as well.
One thing I'm glad I am, certainly that Taylor Miller is involved with the project manager. I don't really have to do it. Other questions? Let's see if, Case amendment, this is the first amendment, then with the back, right?
My name is Case Amendment. And, primarily for John and Bill. To the work of Coexistence, I'm curious about the Fireguards that's being made on the north side of the valley. And where that fit relative to the front of the designated corridor. And likewise, therefore, to the fence that will be there. Which also, the appreciation that there's a great trail to get a lot of these stuff. And what challenging does this seem or yeah,
Sure. The question was, how does the wildlife corridor relate to upcoming fire smarting, especially along the south boundary and the Three Sisters and in and around the fence? And yeah, we've given that a bit of thought. Part of the fire guard prescription for there is to maintain a thin, prune, clean right along the fence, just to provide that cover for wildlife and create a bit of a break. It's not huge, but we still have to get a fire guard in there. And then also, I mentioned before, the Canmore area trail master plan. While this is happening, it's an opportunity for us to realign some trails and create those secure spaces within the corridor and make that more effective as a wildlife corridor. And then also within the, as we're laying these things out, we're going through, we're having wildlife surveys done on these, on all the work that's been done here, nesting surveys, den surveys. You can sort of start to see where here's a great retention patch, and here's a place you can create connectivity. So it's a bit of an art. It's it's a bit of art that kind of work with it on the land to make it happen. So we're giving it a lot of thought, and hopefully it'll be positive.
Yeah, and I just add to that, there's some great work that's been undertaken. John and Jesse and the gang in the last couple of years have published a couple of papers on recreational disturbance and the buffer zone, shedding a lot of new light on how far that impact is off the trail, and the really good quantifiable science behind that for wolves and bears. Like the fire smart analogy, all the work in the world to protect us from fire doesn't help if each of us in our own homes and our own behaviors doesn't play a part. And it's no different for the effectiveness of the wildlife corridors. We have to ask ourselves, what can you do to make a wildlife corridor more effective? And it comes down to decisions each and every one of us make day in and day out about where we're going to recreate, whether our dog's going to be on the leash, we're gonna have to be out in the dark. And if we do have to exercise in the dark, which a lot of people work with salad, then choosing the right places to do that, whether that's at the Canmore North Center for that kind of activity, and that's Level Trail, so you can reduce the potential for conflict. And that conflict is a predictable pattern for wildlife. The more predictable we can be, the less likely are to have conflict, and the greater habitat security we provide for wildlife. So we all have to get on board, and we all need to have those discussions and work with our local land managers and figure out where and when and how to recreate so that we keep those corridors open.
And let me just lift out something, and since you have this figured this out, we live in a time of big moves. So there's the big moves that have to do with fire smarting, big moves that have to do with fire guarding. There's some really big moves because we've been at this for 40 years now. There's some big moves in our future to make sure the wildlife corridors that are being painstakingly explored continue to function in the future. And we have a big move, of course, the Canmore area, formerly the Canmore area trail strategy, being named the Canmore area trail master plan, which will be coming to soon. With some open houses and some processes that the provincial government has put in place. And I just encourage everyone to stay involved, because we're going to get all those pieces right to hold up our heads in a decade from now, when our children are asking us, well, how'd you do it? And how was your leadership? And what is the role of you as a citizen when it came to making sure that we've got to have all these important things in place? I believe it's possible, and I'm pleased to John Paczkowski, who is a key player in this initiative, the Fireguards initiative, is also a key player in the Canmore area trail management. So that's a piece of good news there. Sarah, back, go ahead.
So, this was 6 months, it's over the year. I think I would say that these cost. I totally understand. I just think that's how it is. But on the funding side, it is some of our technical problems that we find to really literally talking about the problem.
Yeah. So the question was, if there's alternative sources of funding that have been investigated, and we've been relying mostly on our on the grant funding, but we also are relying on the revenue from the timber that we're getting. So that's going back into the project, which has made the project go further. In terms of crowdsourcing, we haven't investigated that too much, just the sheer amount that we would need. It's when you're a municipal government, you have certain and use for funding for projects, and it's difficult to go outside those lines and be a little creative sometimes, but always keen to hear ideas if there were other ways of funding we'd certainly be open to exploring if that was possible within the MTA and our settlements. To not burn them, like to burn them right now, a rep total under $500,000. To burn them a different way, yeah, like not 10 million, but in the millions. So it does increase quite quickly, and like it is all, even the FRIA grants, that's tax dollars that are going from the provincial government to FRIA. It's all tax funded after that. So if there's other creative ways for funding, like again, I'm always keen to hear ideas and to see what's possible. So if there's different ways that people have that they think could work, please bring it forward and we can investigate that.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to ask a question on Zoom from someone named ZB. No idea who that is. Hopefully they can hear me. What happens when embers jump across the fire break? And what's the reasoning for breaks along the subalpine? Traditionally, fires don't progress down alpine terrain. Are you anticipating a fire coming from the spray side? Can you please elaborate your decision making here?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, this group isn't just Stu and John. Like I'm on it. We also have Alberta Forestry. Everything that we do is fact checked with what forestry has done in terms of wildfire behavior and what that looks like. We chose to start working on the Stoneworks Creek side and did a 2-kilometer fire break because in this region where we are, it's unlikely, like you'd have to have a really, really, really bad, like 99.9% fire weather day for the embers to travel more than 2 kilometers. That's why they're 2 kilometers though. They're also built in a way that we're most vulnerable. So the south facing slopes is where we started on the Stoneworks Creek side. And now we're building around and we are building up the spray, like up towards Whiteman's Pass on the Nordic Center side. We prioritize where we're most vulnerable, where the fire is most likely to occur on like a typical fire weather day, because that's the most likely fire we're going to get. We are then going around the community and building landscape level breaks at the edges of the community, and then around just community level breaks to have smaller breaks on the sides that were maybe less vulnerable or less likely, but still need fire protection. So that's how we decided to choose the priority as to where we were building and why we were building. It's based off of good science, wildfire behavior science, not only from our consultants, but also from Alberta Forestry coming in and agreeing with that.
So look, you may have noticed, I'm going to wrap it up here because it's, you have a Zoom until 8:30 and Terry here wants to go home sometimes. So, but just closing comments. First of all, I just want to, big hand for the panel. There's a lot of escape your notice, and not only do they each speak extremely well and have a huge depth of experience, but the questions were pretty killer too. So from you guys, whether it's Canmore or Harvey Heights or whatever, like look at the place you live in and look at the people, the quality of the people and the brain power of the people. If we're dealing with this existential threat, I would say that if anyone can pull it off, it's the town of Canmore and some of the work that's being described here and some of the players up at the front. So thanks for your time today. Take a couple minutes to say hi if you want before you leave. Also, as you leave, if you don't mind, tying up some shares just to help out with the general cleanup. Again, big thanks to Tanya and Terry and Nick for helping support the conversation. Big thanks to you for taking the time to come out and find out about this stuff. Keep your finger on this and keep your eye here. We'll probably continue to promote it and have conversations along these lines as the story unfolds. And last but not least, Have a big hand for these amazing inventions. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you. Bye.